Howdy folks, welcome back to Boondockery. Today I'm going to be assembling my secret fun spot cache. I'm in my bushcraft laboratory today to assemble my cache. And what that's going to entail is, first of all, I'm going to show you everything that I'm going to put in my cache. I'm going to explain some of the reasons behind why I'm putting those particular items in my cache. I'm going to show you the manner in which I'm going to prepare these items for storage within the cache, and talk about how I'm going to place it before you get to see me do it on my next outing to the secret fun spot. First of all, let's go over what a cache is. A cache, C-A-C-H-E, not C-A-S-H. That's different, but you can store cache in your cache if you wanted to. But anyway, I digress. A cache is nothing more than an area that you store something you want to retrieve, but you don't want to keep it with you or at a known location. For my purposes, my cache is going to be stored in a wooded area near my secret fun spot. So therefore, if the need were to arise to where something happened to my food supply, my illumination, I would lose my knife, inclement weather were to come around and I have forgotten my wet weather gear, maybe I forgot my tarp or my tarp was destroyed, my cache is going to have all of those things in one location for me to be able to retrieve those things if and when I need them. Now, this particular cache is going to be very specific to the purposes that I want it for my secret fun spot. Caches can be made for any reason whatsoever. I very easily could use a 35 millimeter film canister that seals up pretty nice to put a flash drive in it with important documents that I want to be able to retrieve if I need to. It could be as big as you would want it. The types of containers that you can use for caches are as varied as your imagination can make them be. They could very easily be a waterproof bag. They could be a Ziploc baggie. It could be an ammo can. It could be a 5-gallon bucket. Any of these things would be perfectly acceptable to use as a cache. Here's a case in point. Many years ago, me and a group of my friends, we decided that we were going to hike the Wildcat Hollow Trail. And it's about 26 miles. And during the time of year that we were hiking and the nature of the terrain and the season, there was virtually no water sources along the entire trail. And because we're a group of friends, we're going to go out and have a decent time, I planned a little something special for the first night's dinner. But I didn't want to pack all that stuff with me. So what I did is I went out the day before we were going to hit the trail, and I hid gallon jugs of water. And where we were going to camp, I had cached a container with all of the food items and cooking items that I was going to be using for that night's dinner. And as we got to each one of the locations to where I hid the water, because I hid them in multiple locations, camouflaged them, so if someone were to see them, they wouldn't come over and take them, or in any other way sort of compromise the cache. And every time we got to those locations, we refilled our water bottles and put the remainder right back where we had it. And then when we were finished with the weekend's hiking trip, I simply drove around and collected up all those items. That was a very good use and a good example of a bushcrafting or wild camping cache. Now, there are all kinds of other reasons why you'd want to make caches, but that was one way that I successfully used a cache in the past. And considering the unsuspected weather situation I dealt with the last time I was at my secret fun spot, it basically made null and void my good quality camera, which I'm shooting with now. And it also put me in a position to where if the temperature had dropped, I would have been soaking wet. And it just so happened I went through all I needed to do to prepare myself for the evening, and the temperature was just fine. It didn't dip below comfort levels for me to be able to get a decent night's sleep. Having that experience, I was thinking this before, that it would be good to have caches there with emergency supplies because it's a very secluded location. There is no cell phone reception whatsoever, and when I'm down in the gorge area, there's virtually no radio communications either, had I wanted to try something like that. All that combined is why I'm putting this together. Let's go ahead and take a look at what I've assembled. This is going to be one of at least 2 caches that I'll be preparing to take to the secret fun spot. I'm going to be using a 40mm grenade ammo can as the container for my cache. The reason I'm choosing to use an ammo can for my cache is primarily due to its durability, its waterproof nature, and its waterproof seal, and it is a good container to be able to transport, in that nothing's going to get dented, broken, or in any way made unusable from transporting it the great distance that I'm going to transport it from my vehicle to its final resting location. Just bear in mind, the items that I have in my cache right now will change as the seasons progress. I can remove certain things, replace it with other things, depending on the season. So naturally in the winter, I'm going to have much more warmer items than the things that I'm showing you now. I'm going to be showing you all the items I'm putting in my cache in no particular order. So these are the things that I felt that were important for me to have in a cache for a multitude of reasons. And we're going to start off with this 5-pound bag of white rice. You might be thinking, why in the world will you be carrying 5 pounds of white rice? Well, I may or may not use all 5 pounds. I'm going to be using the white rice in place of desiccant packs. I'm going to put these in socks. I'm going to divvy them out in socks and place those in different locations in the cache box to absorb any moisture that may be in there when I seal it up today. I have some Propel fitness water drink mix, and this is basically just added electrolytes to your system. Definitely when you are exercising, you're sweating a lot, things like that, electrolytes are very important. I have spare AA and spare AAA batteries. I have a packet of Knorr bouillon cubes. I believe there are 8 in here. And the nice thing about using rice as desiccant, you can also consume it. It's much more palatable eating white rice if you have some type of flavoring. So you can either drink this as soup on its own, or you can prepare some rice with that. I have a couple packages of coffee, because even in a survival situation, a man's got to have his Joe. Okay? Okay. And I have some Fleshable wipes for basic hygiene. Right here I have a t-shirt, rolled up t-shirt, rolled up pair of unders, just in case. Had I had dry unders and dry t-shirt to be able to sleep in, the last time I was at the secret fun spot, it would have been much more comfortable than the situation I was in. Not saying, looking back at it, it would have been perfect, but just to have those items on hand just in case. I have an extra pair of gloves. I have a complete top and bottom Frogtogs wet weather suit. The nice thing about Frogtogs is they're very lightweight and they are somewhat breathable, unlike a lot of the rubberized things. Very compact, very lightweight, and an excellent choice for a, let's say, a not used every single day wet weather suit. The durability is not exactly there, but for this situation, that'll work out perfectly. Right here I have a spare pair of thick hiking socks. I have a big package of my homemade fire starters. I have solid fuel tabs to be using with my stove as an alternative fuel source. I have storm matches, which I will be putting in this Altoids tin, and the reason I'm going to use an Altoids tin to store those in is I can use the Altoid tins to make char, just in case I have the need to be able to further my fire starting, just in case. I have a Sawyer 1 liter water purification set. It comes with the bag, comes with the straw, comes with the water filter, and everything I need to be able to filter water. This particular filter can filter up to 100,000 gallons. I have an extra compass. I have an extra Mres knife. And the nice thing about people knowing that you're into bushcrafting and wild camping is a lot of times they will give you things you already have. And the nice thing about Mres knives is I know they work. I know they're a good quality product. And I have one that I have in other types of kits I take with me. And so I can put this in my cache. I also have 4 MREs. I'll be breaking these MREs down and store them in a particular way, and I'll show you how I'm going to do that to get rid of anything that I would not actually use. I also have an extra headlamp, and it's always good to have illumination. And the best thing about the headlamp is that you can always be hands-free. I know a lot of people will put flashlights and things like that in their caches or their emergency kits, but I personally feel that the headlamp is the best alternative because you can wear it and go hands-free if you need it, or you can just use it in your hand just like you would a regular flashlight. In the back I have an Ecotat emergency survival shelter. This is a really awesome piece of emergency kit. I can use this as a tarp, I can use it as a poncho, I can use it as a tent, a one-person bivvy, and I can also use the bag for foraging or what have you. I'll talk a little bit about that in another video coming up here, probably in the fall. I have my stove, and inside my stove, well, this is my cook set. It's just a basic Coleman camp set, another one of those items that I received as a present, and I've used it once or twice. However, it just didn't get that much use. I have an alcohol stove in there, and the nice thing about alcohol stoves, if you're using alcohol, great, I've got some right here. However, if I want to, I can also turn the stove upside down and use solid fuel tabs on top of the bottom because I've turned the stove upside down, and I can use solid fuel tabs. It all depends on how long I'm going to need to use it, so I'll have multiple sources to be able to heat water, heat food, what have you. I have a hank of 100 foot of nylon paracord. I have a first aid kit, which is very important, and I also have a sole escape bivvy, just in case I'm in a need to keep myself warm and to get that core temperature stabilized. This would be a good way to do it. I've slept in this one before. You can tell it's a little worn, and it actually does a pretty decent job. If you don't need to have all of your heat reflected back on you, just simply unzip it, and it does a great job. And for my placement, I'm going to be using my Molly panel load pack that I just did a video of and released, and you'll see all about that there, but I'm going to be using this one to transport that first cache. Just to recap, You've seen the box I'm going to be using for my cache. You've seen all the items I'm going to be placing in my cache box, and you've seen the pack I'm going to use to transport my cache to the cache location. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be placing the items for my cache in my cache box. Before I put those items in there, I want to streamline everything that's going to go in it. So a lot of that unnecessary packaging is going to be eliminated. Some of the packaging is pretty good in that it protects the item to some degree. Some of the things, it could make it waterproof. If for whatever reason my alcohol bottle were to leak, there are a few things in there that might be destroyed by the moisture. You all know by now, if you've been watching the channel, that I'm a huge fan of Ziploc baggies, and I will be using some. However, in lieu of using Ziploc baggies for everything, I'm going to be using my Food Saver vacuum sealer to create most of the waterproof packaging that I'm going to be using for storage inside my cache box. I'm going to provide you with a quick demonstration of how the Food Saver vacuum sealer works, and then I'm going to get busy sealing up everything I'm going to be sealing. Believe it or not, the first thing I'm going to be sealing is a pair of socks. So the first thing that I want to do with my Food Saver is I want to make certain that I seal off an end, which I've already done. I always make it a point to seal off the end every single time I use this, so that way it's already ready to go. First thing I need to do is measure out the amount that I need, and that right there should be plenty. I also need to leave at least 3 inches safety margin in order to be able to have enough space left to reinsert the bag to be able to be vacuum sealed. I believe I have enough right there, so I'm going to lock that down, and I'm going to trim off the bag. Now I'm going to put the bag to use by putting a pair of socks in here. I'm just going to cram those in there. I want to point out that you do not want to use vacuum sealing for everything. There are going to be certain things that you are going to use and want to reseal. Those are the things that you use your Ziploc baggies for. This right here, if I'm going to be using this pair of socks, they're not going to go back in a bag and go back into the cache. These are not going to be resealed or put back in the cache box. So sealing something like this with a vacuum sealer is perfectly acceptable. I'm going to roll this out of the way and make certain that that is not puckered. And I want to line it up about right there with the green insert. I'm going to fold that down, lock it in position, and you have a setting here for dry, moist, or pulse. Pulse is when you're using things that could be very delicate and crushed by the compression of the bag. And when I have it on dry, these are dry, I'm going to go ahead and push the vacuum. As you can see, it's pulling all the air out of the baggie, making them very small and compact. In just a moment, it's going to seal that bag once all the air's out of it, and it's going to be waterproof and ready to store. The beautiful thing about this type of a system is that it allows you to put things in storage in a very compact manner. It saves you space. However, I have seen people utilize these in a way that's doesn't have a whole lot of forethought in it. I'll just put it like that. I don't want to be insulting. I've seen people do this with things that they're going to be carrying in their pack and putting back in their pack, and they don't keep into account that this has changed sizes. As soon as I open this, they're going to puff up again, and there are certain things that are going to be much larger, if you try to do this with it. So you're going to affect your load plan if you are not thinking about the compactness of the items you're putting in it. For small items, all I do is I slide the bag down, cut it to a certain length to where I know it's going to vacuum seal, and then I turn it sideways, I put it in, close it up, and push seal, move it up, press seal. So what that gives me is two sections. I'm going to slide these AAAs in the smaller or the more narrow of the two. And the AA's will go into one right beside it. Get this down there. Then I'm going to put that right back into the vacuum sealer. Just like we did before. And what I can do now, trim off the excess there, separate the two right down between the two seals. Now I have two small packages. Everything has now been vacuum sealed that I'm going to be vacuum sealing. This is the first time I've ever done this type of vacuum sealing. I've done a lot of food and things like that, but this is the first time that I've used it in this type of a manner. I always like to wait a little bit before I pack anything away, because sometimes the vacuum seals lose their integrity. Anything that has a sharp corner on it, and just about all the things in here have some degree of a sharp corner. I tried to lay them as flat as I possibly could so they wouldn't point up when the vacuum sealing was taking place. If one little teeny tiny hole manifests itself in any of these bags, it will lose the vacuum seal. All of these have been sitting for a good little while now, and I can tell that they are definitely sealed. One thing that's become obvious to me is not all of this stuff is going to fit in one of my cash boxes. That's why I planned on having two to begin with, but I hadn't necessarily planned on having two for this particular video. It's no worries. I'm going to use one for all of my non-edible items, and then for the other cash box, I'm going to be putting all my food, my filtration stuff, anything for water, hydration, and all of my cooking items. These are the food items that I have vacuum packed. I have my 4 MREs, I have my water filter, I have my Propel powder, I have my bouillon cubes, coffee, my cook pot, denatured alcohol, and fuel tabs. One of the things that I was sort of surprised with, that is all the packaging that was removed from these items. I've got it pretty crammed in there too. There's a lot of unnecessary stuff that I would have been taking to the field with me in these cash boxes, that some of them could have been used for starting fires, things like that, but I have a sufficient amount of fire starters to pretty much be able to take care of any fire starting needs that I have. These are my non-edible items. I have all of my clothing here, my t-shirt, underwear, socks, extra gloves, the wet weather suit, compass, fire starters, 550 cord, storm matches, extra batteries. Eve, check this out. I was even able to go ahead and vacuum seal my headlamp. My wipes for hygiene, first aid kit, and of course I have not vacuum sealed my emergency bivvy and my tarp. These are the sachets of rice that I made. 2 of these will be going into each box. And in this sachet, which is a sock, which also gives me extra socks to have with me, there are 3 cups of rice in each one of the large ones, 2 cups of rice in the other one. And if I'm going to be cooking that, I don't really need to worry about having a measuring cup. I have a lid for my cook pot, and when you cook rice, it's basically 2 cups of water for 1 cup of rice with this particular type of rice. In each one of my cache boxes, I'm also going to be putting approximately 10 small and 10 large Ziploc baggies in there as well. That way, if I do need to restore for the short term any of the items that I opened, I'll have waterproof containers in there just in case. Before we pack our cache boxes, I'm going to go ahead and do an empty weight of the box so we can see how much the base weight is going to be before we get started. I'm just going to use a little travel scale you'd normally use for your luggage. And I hope that that's going to be able to go in focus. And I have the weight as being 15 pounds empty. I'm going to start with my non-edible items. I'm going to start off by putting 1 of the sachets in the bottom. My emergency shelter. My bivvy. And in no particular order, I'm going to insert my clothing first. And my other larger items, followed by the remainder smaller items. One thing I don't want to do is to have any of these little pieces of plastic sticking out of the side, so I'm going to tuck those down on the round. And we're good to go there. All the non-edible items packed, ready to go and place in my cache location. Since I didn't have room for both of my sachets of rice in the non-edible items, which I believe that if I'm going to have extra rice in it, it should be with the food stuff and the water filter, because those are items you definitely don't want to have any moisture getting to at all. I'll go ahead and put a couple sachets in here, and I'll hopefully have room for the last one on top. And I'm going to start off by putting my cook pot alcohol, and I'm going to put my alcohol in there upright. And even though it's going to be on its side being transported out, for the long term, it'll probably be sitting in this position, whether I decide to bury it or just camouflage it on top of the ground. And this should be in much better condition at that point. Then start with my smaller items, put them in this small spot down here. Move over to the MREs, which are fitting perfectly in a spot that's left over there. Water filter, and enough room for the last sachet of rice, and my knife. Here we have it. 2 cache boxes ready to transport to the secret fun spot and put in position, and hopefully I'll never need them, but if I do, they are there. This is the edibles cache box. I have the scale zeroed, and we're going to put that on the floor to make it just a little easier to pick up. When you have this amount of weight, these scales can be a little off. And got to set that down so I can actually read it. And that looks to me to be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 pounds. 30 pounds for the edibles. We're going to go ahead and weigh the non-edibles. The scale is zeroed again. Let's see. There's the scale. Let's go ahead and set that down so I can see the weight there. It's 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 28 pounds. 28 pounds for the non-edibles. As far as a regular pack weight goes, neither of those weights are what I would be considered excessive by any stretch of the imagination. And of course, if I was to use, let's say, a 5-gallon plastic bucket as opposed to these ammo cans, it would be significantly lighter. However, I think I could probably get all this stuff in a single 5-gallon plastic bucket. The thing for me is they're not very durable. And these, I can bury these. I can camouflage them. I can just literally lay them at the beside a piece of deadfall, cover them up with leaves, some of the punk from the decomposing tree, what have you, and it's going to be fine for years without any attention whatsoever. Plastic has a tendency to degrade over a period of time. It becomes brittle. And there are, several different types of plastic buckets out there, but it's pretty much been my general experience with the buckets that I've had. You have probably about a 5 to 7 year lifespan on those at max when they're stored outside. Especially if in any way, shape, or form they're exposed to sunlight, they begin to break down pretty quickly. It turns out that having to use 2 cache boxes actually is going to work out very well. I believe Bob Ross would call it a happy accident. I'm going to be able to load each one of the cache boxes onto a separate load frame and be able to hike it out to the secret fun spot, place the cache, return to the vehicle, get the other one, and do the same. Of course, I'm going to video 100% of it, so therefore you're going to be able to see how the pack rides and how the load rides in the pack for that matter. You're going to see how I'm choosing to place my caches at the secret fun spot. So it'll be an all-in-one video. a test ride for the load frames, and also a demo on how I plan on placing my cache boxes. Folks, if you like today's video, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up. If you're liking the content, I'd really like for you to subscribe. And of course, if you're going to subscribe, you may as well hit that notifications bell. And if you like what you're seeing, share it. Share it on Facebook, share it on YouTube, share it on Instagram. Just share it. And most importantly, I know that I'm supposed to be begging for subscriptions and likes, but I personally feel the most important part of this entire process is becoming part of the conversation, being relevant with the discussion through the comment section. You can also go to the discussion section on my actual YouTube page and be able to post things there. I get fantastic information from amazing people daily, and it's rapidly become my favorite part of my YouTube experience. Please consider doing those things for me. Folks, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.